الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He grants us tawfiq and success, and that He makes us the people of Tawheed, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to get closer to Him in a manner that He is pleased with us with. This is another session we are looking at Aqeedah at-Tadmuriyyah with the taqreeb of Shaykh Muhammad ibn Salih al-Uthaymeen, the summary of Al-Aqeedah at-Tadmuriyyah written by Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. And we have now reached the third qa'idah from the 5 qawa'id that the Shaykh mentions when it comes to the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, فصل القاعدة الثالثة في إجراء النصوص على ظاهرها. We are to accept the texts from the Kitab and the Sunnah which describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which describe the unseen, and also in the fiqh. One of the things that the mashayikh, they say that if people make ta'wil when it comes to aqeedah, why don't they make ta'wil when it comes to fiqh? And this is the principle here, which is we accept it ala dhahiriha. Now, the Shaykh is talking about what is Dhahir. Well, like we said last week, there are two things. There's one that is Dhahir, and there is one thing which is known as Haqeeqah. Haqeeqah is the reality, and the Dhahir is what is the apparent. as-Sunnah wal Jama'ah, they take the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the ahadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ala dhahiriha, as the Shaykh said, also in its Haqeeqah, meaning in its reality. So face means face, hand means hand. Whatever has been mentioned, we accept that meaning in its Haqeeqah, but also in its apparent meaning ala dhahiriha. So what they will say, for example, face is not a face in Haqeeqah. Face is not a face ala dhahir. So what they will say is face, and then make the opposite of what is dhahir, is they make ta'wil. And they make the opposite of what is Haqeeqah, and they make majaz. So they will then say face refers to reward. So this is what the Shaykh is saying here, that the Aqeedah of Ahl-Sunnah and the manhaj of Ahl-Sunnah wal Jama'ah is to accept fi ijra' al-nusus ala dhahiriha. So he says, rahimahullah, ظاهر النصوص ما يتبادر منها من المعاني. So the Shaykh is basically saying is that what we mean by Dhahir is what the meaning is there. So now this is important because some of the people of Tafweed, they say, as I think we've covered this before in a previous book, some of the people of Tafweed, they say that the way of the Salaf is to make is to reject Kayf, is to reject the Kayf and also to reject the ma'na. So they will make ta'wil of the Kayf and ta'wil of the ma'na, and they accuse or they attribute that to the Salaf as-Salih. The Shaykh is saying here that this is not wrong. ظاهر النصوص ما يتبادر منها من المعاني. What the meaning of the word is, we will accept that meaning. This is what is the Dhahir. As for the Kayf, this is majhul. As for the Kayf, we say we don't know, and we leave that up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. والواجب في النصوص إجراؤها على ظاهرها بدون تحريف. So then, when we accept it as Dhahir, we are not going to change the wording. So now the Dhahir then changes. So what they say, for example, وَكَلَّمَ اللَّهُ مُوسَى تَكْلِيمًا, they will change it to وَكَلَّمَ اللَّهَ. So now the mutakallim, the one who is speaking, turns into Musa, not Allah. So what they say, okay, we'll do the Dhahir, we'll accept the Dhahir, but let's make tahrif before we change, before we accept the Dhahir. The Shaykh is saying no, he's saying this is not allowed. We accept what is Dhahir بدون تحريف لقوله تعالى, and then he gives us many ayat. And from them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, اتَّبِعُوا مَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكُمْ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا مِنْ دُونِهِ أَوْلِيَاءَ. Follow what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed to you in its Dhahir, in its Haqeeqah, without making tahrif and ta'wil. Why? So now this is the dalil, this is the Aqeedah manhaj of as-Sunnah wal Jama'ah, but then the Shaykh gives us more explanations. So he says, for example, فإذا كان الله تعالى أنزل بلسان العربي. This is similar to what we said last time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed the Quran in a clear Arabic tongue. And in this clear Arabic tongue, من أجل عقله وفهمه, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this clear language so that we can understand it, so that we can perceive it. So face means face, we can understand it, we know what it is. As for the Kayf, we don't know. Then he says, now this is the second reason, وأمرنا باتباعه. So now, why else do we accept the text ala dhahiriha or fil haqeeqah? Is because we have been commanded to follow, as we have heard from this ayah from Surah Al-A'raf, ittabi'u ma unzila ilaykum wa ittabi'u ma unzila ilaykum min rabbikum. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded for us to follow. So that's another reason. So then he says, وَجَبَ عَلَيْنَا إِجْرَاءُ عَلَى ظَاهِرِهِ بِمُقْتَضَى ذَلِكَ اللِّسَانِ الْعَرَبِيِّ. So the lisan al-Arabi is clear. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has explained what is dhahir. إِلَّا أَن تَمْنَعْ مِنْهُ حَقِيقَةٌ شَرْعِيَّةٌ. Now here, this is important. The Shaykh hasn't talked about it just yet. But there are sometimes that the dhahir is not intended. But we have daleel to make that ta'weel. And perhaps more on this will come later on. But sometimes Ahl-Sunnah wal-Jama'ah will accept ta'weel as long as there's daleel for it, either from the Kitab or the Sunnah or from the Aqwal al-Sahaba. And I'll give you an example. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, Yadullah, or the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Yadullah al-Jama'ah. The hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is on the Jama'ah. Now, is the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala literally on top of the Jama'ah? Ahl-Sunnah wal-Jama'ah say no. Yadullah here refers to the support and the nusra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But with this, we also then say that if you are going to make that ta'weel because you've got daleel for it, it doesn't necessarily remove the sifa. So if we say now hand here refers to support because now we've got daleel for that ta'weel, it doesn't negate the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a hand. ولا فرق في هذا بين النصوص الصفات وغيرها. Like we said before, there is no difference between the asma and the sifat or anything else from the unseen or anything in fiqh, etc. We take what is apparent, unless if you've got evidence to say that it is not what is apparent. So he then, Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, فإن قال قائل في نصوص الصفات, if a person was to object, and this is what the people of Ta'wil do, they say لا يجوز إجراؤها على ظاهرها لأن الظاهر غير مراد. They say that you are too literal. So when face is being mentioned or hand is being mentioned, or anyone from the sifat have been mentioned, they say, why are you taking it literally? The dhahir is not intended. So how do we respond? We respond by saying, number one, your understanding of dhahir is different to our understanding of dhahir. Because their understanding of dhahir is tashbih. Whereas we're saying, we accept the dhahir bila kayf. So that's what he mentions now for roughly around half a page, or maybe more than that. And then he gives us the example of Imam Malik, rahimahullah, the person asked him, Kayf al-istiwa, how is the istiwa? So he says, al-istiwa ma'loom, the istiwa, the meaning is known. So this is dhahir. Wa kayf, majhool. How is the istiwa of Allah? How did He ascend? We don't know. وَالْإِيمَانُ بِهِ wajib, and to believe in it is wajib. So now here we have the manhaj of the Salaf al-Salih. But Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, even before that, gives us ayat from the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a description of Himself subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is because He has spoken, like we have said, in a clear manner, and He has commanded for us to follow it, and this is what we're accepting as the dhahir. If you understand now from dhahir that is tashbih or something like that, then you are the ones who are conflicting with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded. So he gives us a number of ayat. يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُبَيِّنَ لَكُمْ وَيَهْدِيَكُمْ سُنَّ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to explain so that you will be guided. And there are many other ayat that he brings. Then the Shaykh says, وَقَدْ اتَّفَقَ السَّلَفُ الْأُمَّةِ وَأَئِمَّتُهَا, that the Salaf of this ummah and its leaders are all agreed أن النصوص الصفات تجري على ظاهرها. All of them. So now there's an ijma from the Salaf al-Salih that we accept it على الظاهر and في الحقيقة. But they say اللائق بالله عز وجل من غير تحريف, meaning, as people say in the English language, in a manner that befits His Majesty. In a manner that befits His Majesty. So the Shaykh is saying this is the manhaj of the Salaf al-Salih. So when they say that the dhahir is not intended, what do you mean by dhahir? In their mind, dhahir is tashbih. Whereas the Shaykh is clearly saying here that that is incorrect for more than one reason. The Shaykh then says, if we were to accept that dhahir is not intended, then what happens is that they will then end up making ta'wil of everything in the religion according to what they think is not intended. فَجَرُوا هَذِي النُّصُوص وَغَيْرَهَا مِن نُّصُوص الصِّفَاتِ عَلَى ظَاهِرِهَا وَقَالُوا. So what they did is then they made ta'wil and they say the Dhahir and the Haqeeqah is not intended, there is a hidden meaning, etc. إنه مراد الوجه اللائق بالله تعالى فلا تحريف ولا تمثيل. So they say that we will attribute it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but what they are saying here, that we are not going to change the wording and we are not going to liken Allah to the creation. So another way that they, or another approach that the people of Tafweed have, is that they will say that we will accept that this is the wording, but we don't know what the meaning is. So another approach that they have is they will say, okay, Allah has a face, so we'll affirm the sifa, but what is face? We don't know. So they will make tafweed of the ma'na as well as the kayf, and this is what we were saying before. Ahl-Sunnah wal Jama'ah, they take the wording ala dhahiriha, and from that we understand that there is no tafweed in the ma'na. There is no obscurity in the meaning. Face is face, hands are hands, istiwa is istiwa, nuzul is nuzul, descending is descending, etc. So the Shaykh makes also another point here, is that when you are to say that, okay, we are not going to take it in the Dhahir, and all of these texts are not intended for you to take it in the Dhahir or Haqeeqah, and then we're going to make majaz of it, and we're going to make ta'wil of it, then that basically opens the floodgates for them to do absolutely whatever they want when it comes to the matters of the unseen, but also when it comes to fiqh. But this isn't correct, as the Shaykh has said in the beginning, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a religion and He has made it clear for us, and then He commanded for us to follow it. How can you follow something which is not in its apparent, and there's hidden meanings, etc.? So this is what the Shaykh has mentioned there as a benefit as well. Then he says, فَصْلٌ وَالَّذِينَ يَجْعَلُونَ ظَاهِرَ النُّصُوص مَعْنًا فَاسِدًا فَيُنْكِرُونَهُ يَكُونُ خَطَأُهُمْ عَلَى وَجْهَيْنِ. The Shaykh then says that those people who say that, they say about us, they say that we accept it on Dhahir, and that makes us the mushabbiha. So Allah is a face, Allah is a face. How is the face of Allah? We don't know. They say you are making tashbih of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the khaliq and to the makhluq. So they say that you have to make ta'wil in order to not fall into tashbih. So the Shaykh is saying here, how do we respond to that? Number one, he says, when they make their ta'wil, أن يفسر النص بمعنى فاسد لا يدل عليه اللفظ فينكرونه لذلك. What they will end up then doing is they will get face. I'm just using face as an example all the time, but you get the idea. You can apply this to all the sifat. They will get face and then they make ta'wil of it. Where is their dalil to change that meaning from its Dhahir? There is no dalil from it. So then what they're going to do is they're going to corrupt the meaning of the Quran, and they're going to corrupt the meaning of the ahadith. And then the Shaykh gives us examples. Like I said, I don't want to make it lengthier than we already have. I'm just trying to summarize it. And then they give other examples as well. So for example, another example, this is an example that they always give. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about Nuh alayhi salam, tajri bi'ayunina. And Nuh alayhi salam, when he was on the ark, tajri bi'ayunina, that he was floating, or he was passing on the water with our eyes. They say, look, is the ark of Nuh alayhi salam in the eye of Allah? Is the eye of Allah inside the ark of Nuh? So they will say, look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said tajri bi'ayunina, but the Dhahir is not intended. So they will use ayat like this. They also use the hadith. In the hadith Qudsi, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ibn Adam, maridtu falam tu'idani. I was sick, but you didn't visit me. This is hadith which is well known, Sahih Muslim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say this to the person. So what they will say is, look, you can't say that Allah is ill. You can't say that Nuh alayhi salam is floating in the eye of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do you respond to those? The first response is sufficient, which is what they have done is that they have taken a meaning in its incorrect form, and then they've changed the meaning, which then corrupts the actual meaning and the context. That's the first thing. The second thing Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah says is that this is something which is known as tarkeeb al-lafzi. I mean, this is an example that he gives, but what we're basically saying here, what the Shaykh is actually basically saying here, if you've got daleel, like we said a moment ago, if you've got daleel for the ta'wil, that is the manhaj of the Salaf as-Salih. If you don't have daleel for the ta'wil, so if you say face means reward, where is the Salaf as-Salih in this, that face means reward? And then they use that to say that Allah doesn't have a face, of the sifat of the face. Hands mean power. Allah doesn't have hands. Allah just has power. Therefore, hands, whenever it's mentioned in the Quran, it refers to power. Where is that? بَلْ يَدَاهُ مَبْسُوطَتَانِ, both of his hands are outstretched. عَلَى ظَاهِرِهَا. But then what they will say, no, بَلْ يَدَاهُ مَبْسُوطَتَانِ, meaning his two powers are outstretched. This is ma'na fasid. This is what the Shaykh is saying here. It changes the meaning completely, and it doesn't even fit in the context, because they say, وَقَالَتِ الْيَهُودِ يَدُ اللَّهِ مَغْلُولَةٌ. The Yahud say that the hands of Allah are tied. The meaning is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded Banu Israel to give in sadaqah, to look after the poor and the needy, and to support the religion that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to them. You know what they said in response? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can't support his own religion. We are wealthy, we are successful, we are rich, we've got a lot of money. So Allah needs our help to support his religion. This is what they said. And this is what they continued to say from the time of Musa alayhi salam. Imagine all the way past Isa to the time of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because this ayah was revealed in Medina. And this is the Aqeedah. This is the Aqeedah until today. They believe in something which is known as symbiosis. Symbiosis is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists, but it's a mutual existence. Meaning Allah exists, humans exist. Humans' existence is dependent on Allah's existence. But there's no problem in that, right? But they say that the existence of Allah is also dependent on not human existence, on Banu Israel only. As for whoever is not from Banu Israel, they are the abid. They are just slaves, they are worthless. You can kill 40,000 of them, doesn't make a difference. But if they kill one of yours, then that is a big problem. I've kind of digressed, but the point that the Shaykh is saying here kind of fits into what I'm saying. This ayah was revealed because the Yahud were saying this at the presence of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. قالت اليهود يد الله مغلولة. They continued saying this. They said the hands of Allah are tied. They need us. He needs us to support him. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala completely rejects this erroneous aqeedah. بل يداه مبسوطتان ينفق كيف يشاء. His two hands are outstretched, and he spends however he wants. Now, let's change hand to refer to ability. You can see how this corrupts the meaning completely. So this is what the Shaykh is saying here. أن يفسر النص بمعنى فاسد لا يدل عليه اللفظ. It doesn't make any sense. The ta'wil that they're making doesn't fit in, and it completely corrupts the meaning. What do we do about these two examples that they give? Because they do these examples. They give you ideas and examples. And they say, look, if you're going to follow what is Dhahir, that means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is inside the creation, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is independent of the creation, just like the Nuh one. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, this is what he talks about, at-Tarkib al-Lafzi. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, تَجْرِي بِأَعْيُنِنَا. He was floating in front of our eyes, or under our eyes, or with our eyes. Does that mean that his floating was in the eye of Allah? Or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is part of the floating of Nuh's safina? Answer is no. So the Shaykh is saying here, linguistically this is correct for us to say this. You are under my watch. We say this even in the English language. You are under my eyes. It's under my nose. All of these different things. So the Shaykh is basically saying, just trying to give you the examples from what we have in the English, but this is also present in the Arabic language. He gives an example. Fulan yusir bi'ayni. Such a person is walking under my eye. This is well known in the Arabic language, until today, well known in the Arabic language. So the Shaykh is saying here, what they will do is they will use these kind of things, and they will say, look, you can't take it in the Dhahir, therefore you have to make ta'wil of it. And if you don't make ta'wil of it, then you're making, you're attributing imperfection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you're making resemblance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the creation. So what they will do is they will use one or two examples, and they will say, we're going to do this with all the sifat now. And like we have said, this completely changes and corrupts the meaning. As for the hadith, where Allah in the Sahih Muslim, the hadith Qudsi, Ya ibn Adam, maridtu falam tu'iddani. I was sick and you didn't visit me. And then the hadith Qudsi actually goes on. Ya ibn Adam, I was hungry and you didn't feed me. O son of Adam, I was thirsty and you didn't give me anything to drink. The meaning is clear not only from the context but also from the understanding of the Salaf as-Salih. Because the person, if you read on, he will say on the Day of Judgment, "Oh Allah, you are Rabbul Alameen, how can you get ill?" So the Messenger of Allah says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say on that day, Fulan was not well and you had the ability to help him or cure him or attend to him in whatever way, but you didn't do so. Had you done that, you would have found me with him, meaning the mercy and the support and the reward, etc. So what they will do is they will use these examples. They'll make it seem like, yeah, you know what, it makes sense what you're saying. And this is what he has said now over these next few pages in answering what they have said. And then he gives other examples of al-istiwa. I think it's sufficient with what we have said here. And then towards the end of this qaida and this fasl, the Shaykh says, I'm just seeing if there's anything new that he says, because a lot of it's just repetition with new examples, and this is the habit of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. Yeah, I think this is it, to be honest. This is the third qaida. The third qaida is that we accept it ala Dhahiriha. This is what he has said, but also fil Haqeeqah. This is the manhaj of Salaf as-Salih. And the opposite of Dhahir, like we have said before, is to make ta'weel. And the opposite of Haqeeqah is to make a majaz out of it. And both of them are very similar. What we will say is that majaz requires dalil, ta'weel requires dalil. Otherwise, we will keep the kalam ala Dhahiriha. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He grants us the best of tawfiq and success in the dunya and the akhirah. هذا والله أعلم وصلى الله على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Next week has got the fourth qaida, and again there's a lot of this that we've done kind of before, so it doesn't require that much of a description. But in Al-Qaida Al-Rabi'ah, he gives us a number of objections that they bring and responses to that, but I think a lot of it has already preceded, but we'll go through what the Shaykh has to say with the examples that he gives. بِأَوْنِ اللَّهِ سُبْحَانَكَ اللَّهُمَّ وَبِحَمْدِكَ أَشْهَدُ أَن لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَنتَ أَسْتَغْفِرُكَ وَأَتُوبُ إِلَيْكَ.